I was summoned to a meeting with Wayne Bennett in late 1989. I went over to the Broncos clubhouse, and I didn't think anything too much of it, actually, because it was quite a regular occurrence to be called into Wayne's office to have a meeting. He used to tell you about what he thought about your form, how you were training, all that sort of thing. I went in to see him, and he said, I want to talk about next year. And I said, fine. I thought he was going to tell me about the players we should approach or what was going to be happening. And he said, I'm taking the captaincy away from you. And anybody that knows Wayne Bennett would realise straight away that he doesn't joke. He's a fellow that when he's talking common sense, he looks you directly in the eye, he doesn't muck about, and just gets what he has to say off his chest. And I had that gut feeling that everyone gets in their life when they don't want to hear something. And I looked at him and I had a bit of an embarrassed smile, if anything, across my face, and I said, are you fair dinkum? And he said, yes, I am. I'm taking the captaincy away from you. And there was an eerie silence for 10 or 15 seconds, and I just kept looking at him and trying to convince myself that maybe it was a dream or something. And then I looked at him and he said, do you want to know why? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, there's a couple of reasons. And he went on to explain how he needed all of his representative players to be available as often as possible, but realised that while the rep players were away, that someone else had to captain the side. Now, that was the start of a little bit of disappointment for me, because Gene Miles and myself had probably been the closest to footballers at that stage. He was my best friend, had been for many, many years. And Gene was appointed eventually as the Broncos captain. Now, Gene and I had spoken about our representative careers quite regularly. He came up to see me about it, and he just said, what do you think about me and the Broncos captaincy? And I looked at him and I was embarrassed and scratching myself and said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, would you be upset at all if I accepted the Broncos captaincy? And I said, you can't. Wayne told me in our meeting that he wasn't going to consider any player that was a representative footballer for the Broncos captaincy. He said it just wasn't in his plans at all. And Gene said, oh, look, I've been thinking about it, and I don't really want to play rep footy anymore. We both took a step in probably the wrong direction. I've got to admit it, I was pretty angry at Gene to start with. I didn't think that he'd accept it. I put myself in the same position, and I thought, well, maybe if he was captain and that I was offered it, I'd sort of say, hey, no, look, you know, I think that the Gene should still be captain. Maybe I think you've made the wrong decision. I don't know whether I would have said that to Wayne if the roles had been reversed. It was a sad thing because we'd been very, very close friends for years and years. I'm pretty angry at myself for the role I played in letting our friendship separate a little bit. Perhaps Gene played some small part in it. I'm not pointing the finger at him at all. Maybe it should have been me that should have just shut up and said, hey, yeah, okay. The only disappointing thing in the whole case was what the Broncos wanted me to do. They wanted me to say at that stage, I didn't want the captaincy. They wanted me to step away and say, look, I've decided that I don't want to captain the Broncos this year. I want to be away from, I'm going to be away from the club of rep football, and I'd be pleased if someone else would take over that's going to be there full time. That would have been an easy way to step out of it, but for me, that's not what I'm about. I've never tried to hide from anything. That, you know, it was explained to me that I wouldn't have to be embarrassed. I don't care if I'm embarrassed. I just want the truth told.
He's the opportunity. He might go all the way.
So what went wrong last Thursday at the place many thought would be Wally's retirement home, Broncos headquarters?
We weren't in the position to make the same offer that we made last year, or else we wouldn't be able to keep some of our other players. So we've had to make a tough decision, and in this case, unfortunately, Wally won't be with us next year.
It wasn't a great shock to many insiders that months of negotiations had finally broken down. Nevertheless, John Rebo was feeling the pressure as he dropped the axe.
This has been easily the toughest decision I've had to make since I've been at the club. You know, as far as Wally goes, he's a legend, and he's done a lot for rugby league for Queensland the last 10 years, and unfortunately, I'm the one that has to bear the bad news.
That press conference started one of the most dramatic days in Queensland League history. By comparison, politically, it was as stunning as Joe Bielke-Peterson's resignation. There must have been 50 media personnel waiting for a red Mercedes-Benz to arrive at Gilbert Park on Thursday afternoon. Lewis looked bemused, It's known he's bitter, he's resentful, but he handled the probing with aplomb.
It's quite easily the most disappointing moment of my life. But I won't be saying any more than this, any more than expressing my disappointment, because the team have got a very important game.
The news spread quickly. Dozens watched from the sidelines as Wayne Bennett tried to prepare his side for a preliminary final. But Bennett too was set upon. After all, he'd been the one who decided to sack Lewis as captain.
You know, we've had our ups and downs. Early in the season I made my decision. There was nothing personal then, there's nothing personal now. I mean, we can't afford to keep him here. That's the situation. We can't afford to stay at the price that was offered. Well, that's his decision. What I was disappointed in more than anything else was that I wasn't sacked by Wayne, because he'd said, and I think I can just about quote exactly his words, that he was responsible for all the hiring and firing of football talent in that club. He had the sole responsibility and had that given to him by all the directors of the club. Now, when I was given the axe, it was by John Rebo, and I probably would have preferred if Wayne had to come up to me and said, listen, I think that your football days are finished, or that you're a bad influence on the club, or your playing days are over, you're a has-been, and we don't want you anymore. All I wanted was a straight-out answer, not some petty offer that was given to me, which John Rebo knew I was going to reject.
Picked up by Stewart. They've got a fair few men to spare out there. Daly coming back inside. Daly now gets it out to Belcher. Belcher decides to go himself. Bradley Clyde. Clyde on his way through now. Duffy slipped over. He's no chance of getting him. And here's another try for the Canberra Raiders. And that makes...
I often deliberated whether I was made a scapegoat. I'm not really sure. There's obviously a lot of pressure on Bennett. There was a lot of pressure on John Rebo as well. But I didn't think that the Broncos' failure in those 2 years was solely my fault. Now, I looked at it and there was only one change made in all that time, and that was my sacking. And I thought, surely it can't be one bloke's captaincy that's caused this club to fail so miserably. I think the biggest problem with myself and Wayne Bennett was that we just couldn't agree on a nice middleman area. By that I mean he had his ideals, what he wanted me to achieve, and I've always been a player that's really done what he wanted on a football field, and I believe that's what's made me so successful. I believe that by playing my own roles at any stage during a game and trying things that I think will be successful, you really can't plan a defensive method against that. Now, plenty of people have been successful in defence against me, but you can't plan it. It's just spur-of-the-moment stuff that you've got to react to. I prefer to stick to my own methods that have worked for me in the past. And players like Dale Shearer, Peter Jackson have been the same. They're guys that really have been able to do anything at any stage during a game and more times than not been very successful. I think that the three of us would probably be more successful in teams not coached by Wayne. And in saying that, I'm not for one moment trying to indicate that he's not a good coach, because he has proved in the past that he is a very good coach. But it's quite obvious that I'm best suited to a team where Wayne Bennett's not involved.
Refuses to risk an early comeback against medical advice.
If I do come back too early, I'm only going to break it again and have to sit at home for a couple of months and go through more operations. So I think I'd be wiser to let the tour go and really make sure that the arm's 100% for next year.
Lewis has a new fiberglass cast on the arm after the broken bone shifted slightly. He admits it's now a race against time to make the tour which has basically driven him to continue his playing career.
Wally was ruled out of the team by the Australian medical officer, Dr. Gibbs, Nathan Gibbs. And prior to the medical examination, I rang Nathan Gibbs and I said to him, Nathan, if you have any reservations about Wally's fitness, I would appreciate it if you give him the benefit of the doubt, because I think we owe him that. Nathan Gibbs said, yes, I'll do that. He rang me before he announced to the press and said, look, there's no way I could pass him as fit because his arm is broken and he's not, and as a matter of fact, there should be a reassessment in probably anything from 2 to 4 weeks. He said, on your say-so, if he'd have been 90% fit, I would have passed him. Now, if anything, Wally was given a little bit of an edge.
I'd heard persistent rumours that my arm injury wasn't going to be past fit. Now, there's been heated debate since that day of who was right and who was wrong, I eventually had to front the Australian Rugby League boss Ken Arthurson with my claims. I told them of my claims and that I had the proof. There were a couple of journalists that were with me that day when a rugby league official said to them that I wasn't going to go on the tour. This official told the two journalists who come and passed the information to me. They were both prepared to sign statutory declarations to prove that. I fronted Ken Arthurson about it, and I didn't at all want to embarrass anyone in particular. All I wanted was a fair go, and I didn't think that I was getting one in this stage.
The fact of the matter is that I really think that Wally was incorrect there in saying the things he did, because I've got the highest possible regard for Dr. Gibbs, not only as a medical officer but as a person, and I thought that it was an unnecessary slur on Dr. Gibbs, and Wally and I really did fall out on that particular issue. But you know, I can understand, saying all of that, you've got to understand how disappointed the guy must have been. He was all set to establish a record, which there's no doubt in the world he would have done. He'd have been selected had he been fit.
He said that he had spoken to somebody who, as a rugby league official, passed what was said more as a personal view than as a rugby league official's claims. I had to accept those. I'd given Ken my beliefs on the incident, and he'd returned them. Missing out on the tour was an extreme disappointment. The thing that was hardest to swallow out of everything that happened and all the disappointment, I couldn't understand why I was forced to face a medical test at a completely different time than any other player in the team.
Wally has always had that remarkable propensity to get people's back up, and he certainly did get people offside. For anybody to say differently, they'd be having themselves on. But, you know, over the years I've been under enormous criticism to relieve Wally Lewis of the captaincy of Australia, but I've never succumbed to that sort of temptation to do it, because I honestly believe that he was the best man for the job, and I think he proved it. And the biggest thing that I can always say in favour of Wally Lewis, he was always proud to pull on the jumper, the green and gold jumper of Australia, and he never ever let us down.